I don't know about you guys, but when I hear the name Daniel Ricciardo, the first thing that comes to mind is his glory days at Red Bull, when he was seen as the next big thing at the team just before Max Verstappen came into his own. But it has been a few years now since Daniel was a legitimate contender for the top step of the podium, and it's looking like next season, the Honey Badger's only option is to be a reserve driver. So which team is willing to take Daniel in as a reserve driver? Does it make sense for him to take the opportunity? How does he feel about taking a step back in his career? And how does he really feel now that Oscar Piastri's move to McLaren is now official? Well, let's talk about it then. But before we do, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on our latest uploads. Now that's out of the way, let's get started. Discussions about Ricciardo's future have ebbed and flowed throughout this past few weeks. A story that started with the certainty that Daniel will be moving to Alpine, a team that is arguably the next best thing next to McLaren, who also has a seat to fill for next season, has now plummeted to talks about Daniel possibly taking a reserve driver role for next season. In his recent talk with Sky Sports F1, Daniel would be asked if he ever thought of slotting himself into Red Bull, Ferrari, or even Mercedes lineup if it came at the cost of being a reserve driver for some time. Daniel would reply with, "I'm pretty open-minded with any scenario. I think there's pros and cons with all of it. There's pros with having some time off as well. Currently, the 18 months I've had has been more challenging than not, so maybe some time away would be good. But then also, staying active is good. That's why I kind of want to hear everything, even if it's a reserve. I don't want to be too proud to say I'm too good for that. I just want to hear everything and see what makes sense. It could be something that sets me up better for the future, and next year may be one of those years where I need a bit of patience." Of the three teams mentioned, Mercedes would be the most likely team to be interested in such a deal, since both Red Bull and Ferrari have their driver pairings locked in for the foreseeable future. While Mercedes, on the other hand, are still on the fence with Lewis, who is still contracted for next season, but beyond that is still yet to be decided, with the 7-time world champion jumping back and forth between being hell-bent on retirement and saying that he still has the fire to compete. And it seems as though Mercedes' situation would fit Daniel's preferences, as the Honey Badger also mentioned that even though he's willing to be part of a growing team, if the opportunity to compete for race wins right away came his way, that he would obviously take the latter. In his words, "I still definitely have the ability to love a project, but of course, if there's this longer project and this one where you're going to win tomorrow, of course I'm going to go for the quick wins. They are things that I will definitely give some thought to. I don't also want to be stubborn or short-sighted and be like, no, I'm not interested in that. I will give everything its respected thought. From 2017, every 2 years I've been with a different team. I don't want to just sign something and think, wait, now something else is there for 2024. So it's probably not as simple as just getting somewhere on the grid next year. It can go probably in many different directions, so I don't think it needs an immediate decision. It's going to be about what's best for me." But Daniel would also be realistic, saying that the past few years have been tough for him and that he has to work himself back to who he was in his Red Bull days. "Winning makes me happy," said Daniel. "I know I've got a bit of a road ahead to get back there, but I think all those things are still possible and that fire in my gut is still there. For sure, it's been hurt at times over the last couple of years, but it hasn't gone away. I know in my gut, if I still feel like I can do it and I still want it, then I'll find a way to get back. Ultimately, it comes down to me. Not saying I have every option, but if I still want to do it, I think I still can. It's obviously adversity, so you do certainly feel it, but I always feel like success is all the more sweet. And as much as Daniel has been suffering on track, the same could be said with his off-track problems, as many fans felt that Daniel had been backstabbed by fellow Australian Mark Webber, who was instrumental in getting Oscar Piastri to sign for McLaren. But Daniel would clear the air and say that Mark had approached him recently to apologize for what had happened. And not to anyone's surprise, Daniel would say that he accepted his apology, and that he had no hard feelings for what had happened and the role that Mark played in it. "We hadn't seen, obviously, each other in person since it all started," said Daniel. "I feel he didn't need to, but he felt like he wanted to, in a way, apologize and try to just see how I'm doing. Obviously, I know how this sport is. It's nothing personal to me. He wanted to make sure that I knew that and understood that, and just to make sure that I felt okay. He feels really bad, obviously, about how it's gone down and obviously how things have been put out there in the media. So yeah, it was obviously nice to speak to him." Speaking of reaching out, the Honey Badger also revealed that he had reached out to Oscar Piastri after it was confirmed that he was joining the team to tell him that he has nothing to worry about any bad blood that may come between them. In Daniel's words, "I've also spoken to Oscar, to be honest, and just made sure that there's no bad feelings there. I understand how this works. He's trying to make it. He's trying to get into Formula One. And this moment should be also really big for him. I don't want to make it a bad situation for him. That's that. It's nothing personal. So that's all the conversation was. And I truly do wish him well. I want him to have a good run in Formula One. If there's no communication, you never know what someone's feeling or thinking. Obviously, he's a lot younger than me. I don't know how he feels. If he's nervous to reach out and see how I'm doing. Also, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that I understand his position. And absolutely no hard feelings. So that was good. I think it made him feel better. And yeah, I think the last thing he wanted was to have some weird tension between a few of the only Australians in this sport. So I'm glad that we've done that." And as for Oscar, who has been quiet all throughout this ordeal, he's finally spoken to the media about what actually had transpired behind closed doors and what drove him to sign with McLaren. Alpine publicly stated they wish to continue with Fernando for at least 1 or 2 more years. I respect that. But after spending the year out, my hopes were firmly set on an Alpine seat. And the lack of clarity and, similarly to Fernando, a bit of a strange feeling in negotiations, it didn't feel like it was the right decision for me to stay around. The lack of clarity around my future and ultimately a breakdown in trust. I felt the very attractive offer of McLaren and the positive dealings with them thus far were all reasons why I felt McLaren was where I was best off for the future. Both Oscar and McLaren team principal Andreas Seidel would reveal that Alpine was informed of Oscar's move to McLaren way before the team had announced that Oscar would replace Fernando Alonso next season. "Once we were in private, I told Otmar what our position was and what he'd been told multiple times before that," said Oscar. "It was very surprising to me to make that announcement." While Andreas would say, "Alpine was informed well in advance before the announcement they made regarding Oscar driving for them next year. Informed by Oscar, including conversations Zach Brown, the McLaren Racing Chief Executive Officer, and myself had with the management at Alpine of what was going on. Alpine and their team boss Otmar Zafnauer have yet to clarify with the media why the team still chose to bring the case up to the CRB when they were clearly informed by McLaren." And there you have it, guys. So, do you think it makes sense for Daniel to take a reserve role for next season? Or should he tough it out with teams like Haas or Williams, who are more than willing to give him an active role for next season? And who is to blame for the Alpine-McLaren fiasco over Oscar Piastri? Let us know in the comments section below, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't.